Okay, how's it going? I'm at Nazca Lines here. I got the XT1, been shooting photographs of the XT1 for about 7 months. All right, I just want to talk about some basics about the XT1. Firmware. When you turn on your camera, when you get it out of the box, it takes about 2 hours for the firmware to boot up properly. Don't turn the camera off, always leave it on, let it go to sleep. Keep a battery in the camera at night with the camera turned on, even at night while you're sleeping. The minimum number of batteries that you can use for the camera is 3. 1 in the camera, 1 in the charger, and 1 in your bag, okay? Any creative changes that you make to your photos will wear down the firmware, okay? The firmware gets tired really easy. All right, so what I did, you need to find a creative solution to your photos and stick with it. For me, I always use Hyper Negative Film Simulator. I always bump the noise reduction down to -2. I always put the sharpness up to +2. I always leave it on 6500 ISO. And I always leave the focus area as big as possible in the center. If you want to take a picture of somebody in focus but not have them in the middle, just point the camera at them, half press the button, focus on them, then just move the camera a little and then full press and take the picture. With sunsets, you're going to get a better sunset at -2 noise reduction. You can take your highlight tone and your shadow tone and turn it down to -2, both of them, and you can bump your color up to +2. But don't bump the color up to +2 if you're taking a picture of a person, because bumping the color up to +2 will wreck skin tone. I always transfer the fine JPEGs to the iPhone, and inside the iPhone I always turn the highlights down because that increases the saturation, and I always boost the contrast up because that reduces the image of the lens. It makes the photos look more clear and more 3D. The WR lenses have a scratch-resistant coating that makes it really easy to wipe off the lenses out in the field. You can take your t-shirt or a paper napkin, wipe off the lens and blow on it, and suddenly it's clean. The Fuji lenses that aren't WR are clearer, but those lenses are very fragile. They're made out of like tin or aluminum, and if you put them on the ground, you can step on them and crush them. The WR lenses, okay, so the case-hardened magnesium alloy body on the WR lenses is more or less totally indestructible, and so are the WR bodies of the cameras. So you've got your XT1, XT2, and X Pro 2 have got the magnesium alloy case-hardened body plus the tough silver paint. And basically you can take this camera and smash it into the cement and still take photos like new. It's extremely tough. Okay, so it's absolutely imperative to get the WR camera and the lens. You've got 3 choices. You've got the XT1, XT2, and X Pro 2. And you've got the 16WR, the 35WR, and you've got some zoom lenses from Fuji that are all really recommendable. Supposedly they're all good. However, I would try to keep the camera as small as possible. The 35WR is a lot smaller. It's $600 US. The XT1 is already a really heavy camera, in my opinion. It's pretty heavy. And so I think the best option is to get the 35WR because it's half the size and at least keep the camera size small. The 35WR lens doesn't really need to be cropped when you take photos with it, because it's a 51mm equivalent lens, and those photos don't usually need to be cropped, whereas with the 16WR, that's a 24mm equivalent lens, and the subject in the photo is usually pretty small, and it usually needs to be cropped. So for $1,000 more, you can get the X Pro 2 or the XT2 with a 22-megapixel sensor, and then suddenly it's okay to crop the 16WR photos. Whereas with the XT1, it only has an 18-megapixel sensor, and so when you crop the photos, it doesn't have a great crop factor, and the photos have a tendency to be kind of muddy. However, the XT1 is $1,000 on sale, and the 35WR is only $300, so that's $1,300 for the XT1 with the 35WR, and the photos don't need to be cropped. However, you know, in order to crop photos with the 16WR, you would need to spend like $1,700 more. You'd have to get the X Pro 2 for $2,000, and then the 16WR is another $1,000, so that's an extra $1,700 just so that you can crop your photos.
Okay, so basically, just to recap what I think about the XT1 is that it's a better deal than the XT2 and the X Pro 2 with the 35WR. if you don't make creative changes to your photos, if you don't switch from high pro negative to chrome to Velvia to standard pro via, and if you don't change your ISO from 6500 to 400 and so on, if you just keep everything the same all the time and shoot the same kind of JPEGs all the time, the firmware won't get tired, and the camera will produce terrific JPEGs that can be transferred via Wi-Fi to the iPhone or the iPad. And then you can drop the highlights down and bump the contrast up, and you can get totally fantastic photos that are easy to post to Instagram, Facebook, and Flickr. And so like with the XT2, it's a bigger, heavier camera, and I don't think that that's worth it. The XT1 is already really heavy. The XT2 is even bigger and heavier. And what it has is it has a battery pack that has a turbo boost on it, where you can use 3 batteries instead of 1 and put like an electrical turbo boost that you can make creative changes, like you can move your focal point around and it doesn't cause the firmware to get tired and take lame JPEGs, which is the issue with the XT1, is that you've got to keep your creative decisions really simple in order not to make the firmware get tired so that your JPEGs continue to look great. But I think that it's better to do that. It's better to keep your images simple and just get great photos with 1 battery in the XT1 in comparison to 3 batteries in the XT2. Because, the minimum number of batteries that you can keep in the camera perpetually is 3. So imagine if you had 9 batteries is the minimum that you can use if you constantly put 3 batteries into the camera instead of 1. That's a lot of kit. That's a lot of batteries, and that's a lot of batteries that need to be charged. In comparison to the XT1, I only have to keep 1 battery charged out of the 3 all the time, in comparison to 9 batteries charged. I recently was on a boat in the Amazon and I used up 7 batteries. I'm carrying 7 batteries with me. That's more than twice what I need. And I used all 7 on the boat, and with 2 chargers, I found that I was able to charge all 7 batteries in 3 hours. So it isn't really difficult to charge all the batteries. It's just difficult to always keep your mind on your batteries, to constantly go back to the hotel and charge 9 batteries all the time. I just think that that's too much camera, too much kit. The XT1 is already pretty heavy, and I don't think it's worth it to get a bigger, heavier camera. The only advantage of the X Pro 2, I think, is that you can crop your photos, because the X Pro 2 uses 1 battery just like the XT1. So, with the X Pro 2, if you use the joystick to move your focal point around, the firmware is going to get tired just like on the XT1, and the JPEGs aren't going to turn out as good. I think it's worth it to just stick with the XT1, keep your creative choices simple. Don't move the focal point around at all. Don't change the ISO or the film simulator at all. And just take shots with a 35 WR that don't need to be cropped. And I think that that's the answer. So The only issues that I haven't mentioned so far are that with the XT1, I never leave it in auto mode at all. I always adjust my aperture ring. I always set up my shots. I always leave it on 6500 ISO, usually on 4000 shutter speed. In low light, I never drop the shutter speed down below 30. I found that at 4 shutter speed, we miss shots because some of the shots are blurry. And just that, the XT1 is heavy and it costs extra to bring it. And it's extra kit, it's extra gear. When we were in Nazca in the airplane, we were shooting photographs with the XT1 out the window and with the iPhone SE out the window. Now, the iPhone SE is only a 4-inch iPhone that has a great 4K video that shoots at about 400 ISO. And it's very light. It's actually lighter than a deck of cards, so it's almost like bringing nothing. And the 4K video that it shoots at 400 ISO is almost as enjoyable to look at as the high dynamic 6500 ISO shots that we shoot with the XT1. So, while we were in the plane shooting photographs of Nazca lines, at 6500 ISO, my firmware inside of the XT1 had a difficult time figuring out whether it should autofocus on the window of the plane or the ground. So I actually missed shots of the monkey and the hummingbird, which are 2 of the most famous Nazca lines. But while we were in the air, I quickly dropped the ISO down to 400, and what we found after the fact is that the photos that we got of the Nazca lines with the iPhone and with the XT1 were pretty similar. So if you don't want to shoot really glamorous high ISO shots, then you could always just bring almost nothing and just bring the iPhone SE and just shoot 400 ISO 4K video. But the issue with the 4K video is that, like YouTube, we get a lot of negative feedback on YouTube. Most of the people who watch our YouTube videos hit the thumbs down button, and if they make a comment, it's almost always a negative comment. On Instagram, we have the best reception. We're gaining about 50 followers per month on Instagram, and it is possible to just upload 4K video to Instagram. On Facebook, it's difficult to get onto Facebook and Flickr with a weak Wi-Fi signal. It's easier to get onto Instagram with a weak Wi-Fi signal. And the 4K video looks better on Instagram, and also Instagram offers levels. It offers editing tools to make changes to your photos when you upload them. Whereas with Facebook, it's difficult to get on Facebook. The 4K video doesn't really look good on Facebook. And on Flickr, I only have about 50 followers in total. Some of them are reputable photographers with like 10,000 followers, and we get some positive feedback from them. But, you know, sometimes 20 people might look at one of our photos, but oftentimes nobody does. Whereas on Instagram, we're gaining about 50 followers per month, and all of the reception that we've got has all been positive. We get about 20 thumbs up buttons per photo. So that's pretty much all I wanted to say. And the one last thing that I forgot to mention is that I always set it to 400 dynamic range, obviously, because that allows more details, especially in the hair and around the ears. And that's about it. Thank you so much. Bye.
Hi, welcome to Machu Picchu. You got the video? What's up?
Like this. Oh, more. Be careful, sir.
Huh?